Okay, let's dive in. This idea, who actually funds our politicians? And does that money lead to, well, real advantages down the line?
Mm-hmm. Something a lot of people think about.
Exactly. So today, we're looking closely at that. We've got this detailed report, right? It digs into donations to the National Party before the 2023 election here in New Zealand.
And crucially, it then looks at what's happened since the new government came into power. It tries to connect some dots.
Right. And what makes this report useful, I think, is how thorough it seems. It's not just a list of names and numbers.
No, it really attempts to track government actions afterwards, appointments, contracts, policy shifts, and see if there are potential links. It moves us a bit beyond just guesswork.
So our mission today really is to unpack this report, pull out the main insights about potential financial benefits for donors or, their companies.
We're talking appointments, maybe contracts, grants, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and even wider policy changes. For you listening, the idea is to get a clear picture of these possible connections, maybe uncover some aha moments without getting totally swamped in data.
Keep it focused on the surprising bits, the clear examples.
Exactly. Straightforward explanations. Because if you think about the bigger picture, this stuff really gets to the core of how our political system works.
Yeah, where influence might actually lie. Understanding these potential connections is, well, pretty vital if you want to be informed about what shapes things.
Okay, so let's start with the money itself. Where did it come from? The report says National pulled in a pretty large amount in 2023.
Yeah, close to $1.3 million in just the big donations, the ones over the disclosure threshold.
And it highlights Paula Bennett's role in fundraising, too.
It does, quite significantly. Raising $1.8 million in a fairly short time, that's impressive fundraising.
Definitely stands out. So who are some of these key donors the report identifies? First up, there's Warren Lewis.
Right. Auckland businessman, Fairview Metal Industries.
And the donation.
$500,000. That's the figure reported. And the report notes this could be the largest single individual donation in, well, recent political history here.
Wow. Okay, $500,000. That certainly gets your attention.
It does. A figure like that naturally makes you ask questions, doesn't it? About motivations, expectations. Even if nothing explicit is promised, it just shows the high stakes for some people.
Then there's Chris Meehan, Winton. Big property developer.
Yes, he gave personally over $100,000 to National and another $50,000 to ACT.
ACT being one of the coalition partners now.
Correct. And the report mentions a previous donation from a holding company, too. So clearly, property development is a sector that's, let's say, very engaged politically.
Seems that way. And Trevor Farmer, another big name in property.
Yeah, he donated $50,000 to National in 2023. That was on top of $100,000 previously. But interestingly, his support wasn't just for National. He also gave significant amounts to ACT and New Zealand First.
The other coalition partner.
Exactly. So support spread across the current government coalition. His family's involved in things like Viaduct Harbor Holdings, Tramco, major developments. It suggests a, well, broad engagement strategy, perhaps.
Okay, who else? Hugh Ross Jones.
$150,000 to National. Interest in aviation, but also a big property portfolio.
And the report also mentions some large corporate donations that Paula Bennett helped bring in.
That's right, from companies linked to names like Graham Hart, Murray Bolton, Nick Mowbray, though the report doesn't give the specific amounts for those particular ones in 2023.
Got it. But still, a pattern seems to emerge, particularly around property development.
It does stand out, doesn't it? That concentration suggests maybe a strong desire from that industry to ensure its interests are heard.
And one more, Oregon Group Limited.
Right, the parent company for New Zealand King Salmon.
Aquaculture.
And Earnslaw One.
Forestry.
Yeah. The report doesn't list their specific 2023 donation amount, but their industry has become pretty relevant when we look at what happened after the election.
Okay, so that paints a picture. Significant money coming in from individuals and companies in key sectors.
Exactly. So with those donors established, the report then pivots to look at the post-election period. Did any benefits flow back? First stop, government appointments.
And the big one highlighted here is Paula Bennett herself, appointed as chair of Pharmac.
Given her background, senior politician, deputy PM, and as we just discussed, a major fundraiser for National League, that appointment definitely raises eyebrows.
Because Pharmac's role is crucial, right? Deciding which medicines get public funding.
Absolutely. And its independence, or at least the perception of its independence from political sway, is really important for public trust in the health system.
And the report does mention criticism around this appointment.
It does. Concerns about her strong political ties and maybe a lack of direct, specific expertise in, say, pharmaceuticals or health economics.
The argument being that ideally you'd want someone seen as completely impartial, an expert in the field leading Pharmac.
Right. It sparks that debate about what criteria get prioritized for these kinds of public roles. The report suggests a perception, at least, that political connections and fundraising might have played a part here.
Which naturally leads to questions about impartiality.
It can, yes. Though, interestingly, the report states it didn't find other explicit government jobs given to the other major donors we talked about.
So Bennett's appointment seems to be the main example in this material, connecting fundraising directly to a specific appointment.
That appears to be the case based on this report. So the analysis then moves on to other potential advantages, like government contracts or grants awarded since the election.
Okay, now, usually government contracts go through the GTS system, the procurement website. Grants often come from specific funds.
Like the Sustainable Food and Fiber Futures Fund, SFF Futures.
Right. And the report looks at a couple of examples. First, New Zealand king salmon, which, remember, is part of the Oregon Group.
And they secured what the report calls a significant funding partnership via that SFF Futures Fund.
How significant are we talking?
Well, the whole program is valued at $29 million. The government's chipping in up to $11.7 million of that.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. The report notes it's one of the biggest grants from the SFF Futures Fund. That fund exists to boost innovation in primary industries.
And this money is for their future farming program, developing tech for open ocean salmon farming.
Precisely, which you'll notice lines up very neatly with the government's stated goal of growing the aquaculture sector to $3 billion.
And the focus on open ocean farming using fast-track legislation. It all seems connected.
It does. So while we don't know Oregon Group's exact donation, this very large government co-investment in their specific area of aquaculture is certainly relevant. It shows strategic government support for a company in a targeted sector.
Okay, what's the second example?
Winton Capital. Chris Meehan's company. Remember, he donated significantly to both National and ACT.
Yes, the property developer.
Right. Well, the report points out that Winton's big Sunfield housing project is specifically listed in Part 2A of the Fast Track Approvals Act 2024.
Ah, the fast-track legislation. Explain what that means, being listed like that.
It means the project is essentially earmarked for a speedier consenting process. It can potentially bypass some of the usual hoops and delays in the Standard Resource Management Act process. It's for projects deemed significant.
And there's some history here, isn't there? Winton had issues getting fast-track consent before.
That's right. They had a legal tussle with Kainga Ora, the government housing agency, over this Sunfield project. And interestingly, both National and ACT had publicly supported Winton during that dispute before they were in government.
So, prior political support, donations, and now the project is specifically named in the new fast-track law.
It definitely raises that question about influence, doesn't it? The report mentions public discussion linking developer lobbying and donations to these kinds of fast-track outcomes. It looks like a potential pathway where support could potentially lead to favorable legislative treatment.
A very targeted solution benefiting a major donor, it seems.
That's how it appears in the report. And while it notes there weren't obvious contracts or grants for all the other donors mentioned, these two examples, NZ King Salmon and Winton, are presented as quite striking.
Got it. Which leads us naturally into the broader area of policy and regulations. Because even without a specific contract, changing the rules can be hugely beneficial.
Absolutely. Favorable policy shifts across an entire industry can be worth a lot.
So the report details some key reforms brought in pretty quickly by the new government. Let's start with property and rentals, given the donors from that sector.
Okay. The mini-budget actions. Big one was bringing the Bright Line test back to 2 years.
Right, that's the test for taxing gains on selling residential property. A shorter period means less chance of being taxed.
Correct. And maybe even more impactful for landlords, restoring interest deductibility on mortgages for rental properties.
Explain that one briefly.
Sure. It means landlords can again deduct their mortgage interest costs from their taxable rental income. The previous government was phasing it out. This government is phasing it back in fully. It makes owning rental properties financially more appealing.
Okay, significant for property investors. Anything else?
Changes to tenancy laws, too. Bringing back 90-day no-cause terminations in some cases, changes to notice periods, introducing pet bonds.
And the Fast Track Act itself, while naming Winton, also generally aims to speed up development consents.
Exactly. So you take all these together, tax changes, tenancy rules, faster consenting. It arguably creates a much more favorable environment for property investment and development.
And connecting that back to donors like Trevor Farmer, Hugh Ross Jones, these changes align pretty well with their business interests.
They certainly seem to enhance the potential returns and value in the property sector where they have significant stakes.
Okay, what about forestry? Relevant for Oregon Group via Ern's Law 1.
Right. There are new rules restricting farm-to-forest conversions for carbon farming. But on the other hand, a big one, a 50% cut in the annual charge for forest owners in the emissions trading scheme, the ETS.
The ETS charges. Reducing those saves forestry businesses money.
Potentially quite a bit, yes. It's a direct cost reduction for participants like Ern's Law 1. There were also some tweaks to other forestry regulations, so a mixed bag maybe, but the ETS charge reduction is a clear financial plus.
And finally, aquaculture. New Zealand king salmon again.
Yeah, a couple of things. The government passed a law extending coastal permits for marine farms by 20 years.
20 years. That's huge for long-term security.
It provides a lot more certainty for planning and investment, definitely. Yeah. And again, we have that stated $3 billion growth target for aquaculture, plus including aquaculture projects in the fast-track bill. It paints a picture of a very supportive environment.
So, across these sectors, property, forestry, aquaculture, where key donors operate, we see policy shifts that seem, well, pretty favorable.
The alignment is quite noticeable, as the report points out. It does make you ask about the extent to which donations might correlate with or even influence these kinds of policy decisions.
The report even has a table summarizing it all, which really drives the point home. Which brings us to a really crucial piece of this. How does this influence potentially happen? Lobbying, transparency.
Yes, this is fundamental. And the report highlights a key feature of the New Zealand system right now. We don't have a mandatory public register of lobbyists, meaning there's no single official public list of who is paid to talk to ministers or officials, who they're representing, and what specific issues they're pushing for.
Right. Unlike many other countries, we don't have that clear window into who is trying to influence whom.
Exactly. And the report also mentions the lack of mandatory cooling off periods.
What are those?
Periods where former ministers or senior officials have to wait before they can take jobs lobbying the government areas they used to oversee.
Ah, the revolving door idea.
Precisely. And the Paula Bennett appointment to Pharmac gets mentioned again here. Her move from senior politics and fundraising to chairing a major Crown entity without a mandatory stand-down is seen as an example of that potential revolving door scenario.
And people are calling for changes here, right? It's not like this is unnoticed.
Oh, definitely. Groups like Transparency International New Zealand have been pushing for reforms for years. A lobbyist register, a code of conduct, maybe an independent integrity body.
And didn't Nicola Willis herself previously support some of these ideas before she was in government?
The report does note she'd previously expressed support for register and stand-down periods, yes. The Justice Ministry is apparently looking at options now, but we'll have to see what actually happens.
Because without that transparency.
Well, it fosters perceptions, doesn't it? Perceptions of hidden influence, of special access. Even if nothing improper is actually occurring, the lack of openness can erode public trust. People suspect decisions might be shaped behind closed doors by those with money or connections.
So, summing up this deep dive, the report lays out what seems like a pattern. Significant donations followed by, well, benefits.
Yeah, you've got a high-profile appointment, a specific project fast-tracked in law, a major government grant, and these broader policy changes that just happen to favor the industries where major donors are active.
And like the report says, proving a direct quid pro quo, this for that, is incredibly difficult, almost impossible usually.
But the alignment is clear, and it raises unavoidable questions about access and influence. You know, who gets listened to? Whose concerns get prioritized?
And the lack of transparency around lobbying just makes it harder to get clear answers and harder to hold people accountable.
Exactly.
So for you listening, thinking about all this, what does it suggest about how decisions really get made here in New Zealand? Who has a seat at the table? Does money talk? And what other questions does this raise for you about how money and politics mix in our system? Definitely some food for thought.